Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 30, and the Lane County Board of Commissioners. We've been here since 1851. Several of us have been here since 1851. Yes, we are older than the state of Oregon. We were set up by the territorial legislature. And this is our regular meeting. We have quite a bit going on this week, so I'll just in brief say we have a full day of board meetings today. We do have an executive session, should be fairly short. We'll put in either in the morning or the afternoon. We have a half-day work session tomorrow on parks and also on our recruitment and retention audit. And then on Thursday, May 2 at 5:30 p.m., we're having the Budget Committee meeting. That'll be the first Budget Committee meeting of the year. And as part of that budget meeting is a public hearing on the proposed budget, which will begin at 7 o'clock on Thursday, May 2. The meeting itself starts at 5:30, and then the public hearing is at 7 p.m. on Thursday. As for today, we have a couple of adjustments to the agenda. The first is just a heads up, we have our time certain at 9:30 for AFSCME to present their reflections on workplace health. That'll be set up for a 15-minute presentation and 15 minutes for the board. We also have a 10 a.m. time certain, and that is for Alex Kyler and our legislative report. I want to welcome our County Day celebrants. Could you just raise your hand out there in the audience? Thank you. And we'll learn more about that when Ms. Laura Vinson comes up shortly. I have one item that has been proposed to be split out from the regular consent calendar, and that's item B1, the more order amending the Lane Manual Chapter 3 to add provisions pertaining to the Board of Commissioners agenda team. So that'll be a separate discussion. And any other adjustments to agenda that commissioners or Mr. Mokrajewski can bring to my attention? Commissioner Farr.
Not an adjustment, Mr. Chair, but a heads up. I have a Human Services Commission strategic planning meeting which starts at noon. I can be a few minutes late, but I will be out of here at noon.
Okay. Let's see if we can shut things down by, I'll make a note of this, 11:50 a.m. Okay. Anything else? Nope. All right. So at this time, we'll move to our public comment. This is an opportunity for people to take 3 minutes of their time and 3 minutes of public time to present items of interest to the Board of Commissioners and to the public and other government officials as you wish. And I'll just start calling names off so that Mr. Piccioni, you can come forward. He'll be followed by Mr. New and by Ms. Perrine, by Ms. McGee. So welcome. Mr. Piccioni, please give your name and address, and our Vice Chair, Commissioner Buck, will start the timer. You'll get a warning at 30 seconds.
Dave Ivan Piccioni, I live on 658 Van Buren. Thank you. I found out about an idea that one of the candidates for the presidential election in 2020 sounded really interesting and that I support. It was something that the candidate Andrew Yang said. I don't know anything except about this fellow except what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I would like to say that I'm 100% behind Bernie Sanders. And this is just an idea that I like about this other person, but I'm going to still stick for the same reasons that everybody that likes Bernie Sanders sticks to him. This idea that this person, Andrew Yang, was suggesting was a universal basic salary or something like that, about $1,000 whether you work or not. And I'll tell you why I think that's a good idea. Because a lot of times people take jobs not because they think that the jobs need doing, but because they need to support a family, support themselves, pay their rent, buy food. I don't think too many people would get a job at a slaughterhouse unless they had no other option. Andrew Yang, from what I understand, was saying something like $1,000 per person, whether you work or not. I'm not exactly sure of the figures. If I live on SSI and I get less than that, and it's fine. Logging is another thing, you know. I mean, if machines are doing the work, then people should be able to relax and learn things, maybe take a class or two at the university, read a book or a comic book or watch a movie. You know, this have to work for work's sake, I don't think is conducive to a better society, personally. Other things that I would think people would with a conscience would not like to do is work for the petrochemical companies, the fracking, the oil extraction, the coal, all that stuff. So I think that if everybody got a basic salary, we could, and they wanted to work. Besides that, they could pick up all the trash that's at the beaches or around rivers, and would not have to spray herbicides from helicopters if they have an alternative. They would not be able to say, I have to do it because I have to support blah blah blah. They would have that guaranteed, and they could follow their own conscience and maybe get a job that pays a lot less, but that they feel whole with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn that beep off.
All right, and then Mr. New, he'll be followed by Ms. Perrine, Ms. McGee, Ms. Legui, Mr. Dickinson.
County
Welcome.
Commissioner. Thank you. County Commissioners, my name is Jim New. I live in Ward 7. Cities, counties, states, and the country are unfortunately seeing a disparity of wealth that is exemplified in the number of unhoused individuals and families nationwide. The middle class is struggling to maintain a foothold in housing. Most families can barely make rent, let alone mortgages, and over 60% of the families in the country cannot afford an emergency bill of $500. In Eugene, the city and county have installed dusk to dawn curfews on the Free Speech Park in front of Harris Hall, parking lots, and other locations in and around town. Thus, the unhoused spend the nights down on the banks on the islands of the Willamette River. I agree that the state must protect its natural resources from environmental harm and the health and safety of the public that use these natural resources for recreation. Last week, the City of Eugene Emergency Management Program Manager gave a presentation to the Sustainability Commission detailing the consequences of an earthquake event on the Cascadia Subduction Zone fault. The good news is some people are prepared, and the sobering news is the citizens of Eugene will have to be self-sufficient for months, and sizable amounts of citizens will become unhoused, joining the greater than 2,000 unhoused currently here. In May, the voters of Lane County will have the opportunity to vote for a new county courthouse. Should the measure pass, the state would provide Lane County with close to $90 million of the proposed $150 million construction fee. The state should stipulate the county provide a dusk to dawn homeless shelter and community resource center as part of the project. This facility would provide an emergency heat, cold, and air quality relief for the community in event of poor air quality from fires and extreme heat and cooling as a result of climate change. This seismically designed facility could also act as an emergency operations center in the event of an earthquake. Publicly owned buildings are more effective when used 24/7 rather than just for one purpose, especially when the cost to taxpayers is $150 million. Past practice of single use of buildings waste space, materials, and energy. This is a proactive solution to a persistent nationwide issue. Why can't the state of Oregon and Lane County think outside of the box and set an example? As this measure is proposed, I cannot support it. You have the power to make the facility a 24/7 facility for all the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and Ms. Perrine, followed by Ms. McGee, Ms. Legui, Mr. Dickinson, Moxie Leffler, and Jay Mosley. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Linda Perrine. I run a farm in Heather Buck's district out on Highway 58. I too am concerned with the county courthouse proposal. I got my pamphlet in the mail and read through the arguments for and the single argument against. And the single argument against, which I have no further details because the public really hasn't been brought into the process here, states that this project is trying to create 18 jury trial courtrooms to the tune of $1.4 million apiece, while 57, 58 jury trials took place in the past year in the existing county courthouse. While I'm all in support of modernization of the county courthouse facilities, and I actually have participated in the land swap trade discussions for the Butterfly lot in exchange for the block that the county courthouse is due to go on. I can't support a courthouse of that size and the taxpayers footing the bill. What I could support is 9 jury trial courtrooms, half of that number, and putting the other $12 million that would free up into a clean energy fund for the county. These are the kinds of ideas we need to start discussing in this county to somehow move ourselves towards the future of dealing with climate change, finding the resources locally to do it. And I am a taxpayer. I would pick up a chunk of additional tax on my property tax for this proposal. And I could support half of that, but I can't support 18 jury trial rooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Debbie McGee, and you guys probably know the rest. Oh, and then we have a second sheet, right? Okay, go ahead, please.
Good morning. I'm Deb McGee. I've lived in Lane County for 37 years. Last time I was here, I shared the wonderful quote by Robert Swan that's on the cover of the Lane County recycling brochure, saying that our biggest problem is we think someone else will solve the climate problem. Now I'm receiving the digital WasteWise newsletter, and I hope all of you are reading it as well. Because when we develop and implement a Lane County action plan, waste management will play a vital role in helping us understand how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from consumption. Something important I learned from the WasteWise newsletter: I thought I was being an environmental consumer by buying compostable plastic cups and silverware. But WasteWise taught me that many compostable plastics contaminate commercial compost, some of them use harmful chemicals, and some of them actually create more greenhouse gas emissions than non-compostable plastics. Don't we humans have a long history of doing good things, only to find many unintended negative consequences? That said, the recent plastic roundup recycled containers that weighed 4.5 tons. That's 4.5 tons not going into our landfill. That makes me proud. We must become citizens instead of consumers, and to that end, 350 Eugene is trying to engage the community to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we have held 2 community town halls. You will be happy to know that a Lane County Climate Action Plan was prioritized by citizens. Our next town hall is on July 25th, and we will focus on consumption. These town halls have been very well attended by citizens concerned about the climate, and a small number of action-oriented groups are a result of this organizing. I did not see one of you commissioners there. I know you have families, jobs, houses to maintain, but the citizens really do expect that our leaders should be involved with them in solving the greatest threat to our species. You've all heard the saying, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. Well, the people are beginning to lead, and we expect you to show up and be with us. I hope you will attend the July 25th Town Hall. Our generation made this problem, and in the last 40 years, our generation ignored evidence and data. We used so many resources that we broke the planet, and we are leaving our children to fix and struggle to fix it. Storms have doubled. The record tornadoes worldwide in the month of April was 267. Now that record is 758 tornadoes. Last year, in 24 hours, the island of Kauai had 50 inches of rainfall. Imagine that rainfall in Lane County. Imagine the fires from California in Lane County. I do, and I am frightened. I am reading David Wallace Wells' new book, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming. You should all read it too. I understand that it is on AOC's DC office bookshelf, so you'll be in good company. Our ship is full of holes, and it is sinking. All hands on deck, no passengers. Everyone is crew on Spaceship Earth. Please join us.
Thank you. Okay, Chandra, and then Rob Dickinson, Moxie Leffler, Jay Mosley, and you have 5 more names? Okay, so you can bring up the names when we're done. Okay, keep going.
Thank you. Good morning. Chandra Legui. I live in the South Eugene District, and I work for Oregon Wild. By now, you've all heard plenty about why Oregon Wild and similar groups are urging the county to withdraw from the Association of O&C Counties, so I won't repeat those necessarily. I'm here today because one of the primary steps the county can take in this direction to leave the AOCC is to stop funding membership in the AOCC. And with budget committee meetings starting up, this issue is timely now. After discussing this issue with some of you, I'm really appreciative of the efforts of the board to learn more about the organizations that the county funds and to do an analysis of the costs and benefits of dedicating taxpayer dollars to any entity. So I encourage you to complete this analysis as soon as possible so that it can inform the budgeting process and the budget committee and you all can have full and complete information to weigh in making budget decisions. I don't feel particularly confident that the information will be available from the AOCC. The costs and benefits of membership in the organization will probably be hard to assess since their budgets are not public, and it's not entirely clear what the public is paying for, nor how their work aligns with the values of Lane County residents. And beyond paying the cost of membership in the organization, I would like you to consider the costs that go beyond just those dues. Consider the costs and damages from the Timber First mission of the AOCC and the corporate interests that they are linked to. The damages to our forests, the wildlife that live there, the water that flows from them, our climate that can be protected by leaving those forests standing, and recreation, as in the case of the Thurston Hills timber sale right here in Lane County. Finally, I just want to note that the Democratic Party of Lane County recently passed a resolution recommending withdrawing from the AOCC as soon as is practical. Oregon Wild supports that resolution, and we find it really rational, so I hope that you'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rob Dickinson, welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Rob Dickinson from unincorporated Cottage Grove. There are 2 reasons I'm here today. One is I'm here in support of 350 Eugene and calling for the board to adopt a climate action plan for Lane County. There is very little time left to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. We have a very small window of time, and the top priority should be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible. The county has a role to play there. The county must act, and for the county to act, the Board of Commissioners must take this action soon. I'm also here about aerial spraying. People continue to be sickened and harmed by this practice, and the county must act to represent and protect its residents. We're looking for this new group of commissioners for leadership on this issue. Residents of Lane County provided over 30,000 signatures demanding a vote on this issue and our right to pass local laws to protect us from such harms. While we expect to prevail in our legal cases on the existing initiatives, the appeals process is exceptionally slow. It is unlikely that even when we do prevail, that these measures will be able to be on the 2020 ballot. Therefore, we are calling on the Board of Commissioners to refer this critical legislation to the ballot. This is within your power to do. In fact, we believe it is your responsibility to do this. Like I said, people continue to be harmed. I spoke to someone just this week where she herself, after moving to Lane County to the spray zone, was dramatically sickened herself, and her 3 dogs came down with cancer. If when one thing happens, when one person is harmed and sickened, you could call that a random occurrence. When 2 things happen, you could call it a coincidence. When more things like this continue to happen, it's a pattern, okay? So The people of Lane County have waited for over 40 years for action on this issue. I think we've waited long enough. When do we say enough is enough? And it's time for leadership on this issue. It's time for the County Board of Commissioners to act on this issue. We call upon you to refer this legislation soon for the 2020 ballot. Thank you.
Okay. Moxie Leffler and then Jay Mosley, and then we'll move to our next sheet. Sam.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Moxie Loeffler, and I'm an internal medicine physician at Community Health Centers of Lane County. I'm in support of the other speakers so far in regards to climate change. Thank you for that. I am here today as a representative of the physicians unit at the CHC, and I'm with ASCME Local 2831. I'm honored to be part of my medical group. Some of us hold master's degrees in public health in addition to medical degrees. We started an addiction program to help save the lives of people addicted to heroin and narcotic pills, and that program has grown to 9 providers in 2 years. We also have several doctors who speak Spanish fluently, former chief residents, members of the National Health Service Corps, for doctors who choose primary care for low-income people. We care for the homeless, the working poor, elders on Medicare, children, and immigrants. The reason I'm here today is to share with you this timeline of events. We joined AFSCME in July 2017 because we wanted to improve our clinics. We were dismayed that Lane County fought us in our efforts from the beginning, disputing our right to form a union in court in November 2017. They argued that we were too similar to the psychiatrists and could not join AFSCME without them. In March 2018, we won the case. And then the psychiatrists received COLAs and an increase in their pay scales. Their wages were increased at the top by 17%, and a new director position was added at an increase of 22%. In 2015, all of us were given raises together with the psychiatrists, so this was a departure. During 2018 and so far in 2019, primary care physicians who joined the union have had COLAs and raises withheld. We have been punished for our aspirations to improve patient care. Our thousands of patients deserve to keep their relationships with the doctors who know them best. We are glad that AFSCME and Lane County have made progress in developing ideas about how to increase the involvement of doctors in patient care and scheduling changes. But Lane County needs to make amends to our group of physicians regarding the delay of 21 months since we joined the union. We ought to have had a contract in January of 2018, and we ask you, commissioners, to help settle our contract, and we ask what can be done to ameliorate Lane County's administrative strategies that led to the strike of the nursing and general units in 2017. That was the first strike in our organization in 38 years. We have coworkers that we honor who are treasures to our community, the nurses, the office assistants that make patient care possible, and they do not belong outside the building ever again. We work in a system that needs healing, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jay Mosley, followed by Sam Kropp, followed by Dave Barta.
Good morning. I'm here actually to, Jay Mosley, and I live at 1190 West 12th Avenue. I actually live a block from a site that is owned by the county, and it's at 13th and Tyler. So I'm here this morning to ask you to have a work session on a proposal that is in front of you, and it's a proposal for just three Conestogas on this lot. That's not a lot. It won't help a whole lot of people, but it's something. And it not only is something for the 3 people who might live in these Conestogas, it's a plus for the county. It's an outreach to say, well, this is something we can do to help the people that are unhoused. I thank Commissioner Sorensen. I believe he's going to present this proposal for a possible work session later. All I can say is please have that work session. This has been talked about in the neighborhood for a lot of years, probably about 5 that I've been involved. I've done 2 surveys, and it all shows a welcoming neighborhood. There's not a soul that opposes something being done with that lot, let alone 3 Conestogas. In addition, CSS has stepped up to say that they would support and maintain these Conestogas, and that's important. That would need to be done. Finally, the Jefferson West Side neighborhood has also agreed that if you decide to go forward by having this work session and saying, yes, let's look more formally at this, I grant you everything so far has been informal, but if you move forward formally, JWN will have formal hearings, will reach out into the neighborhood to make absolutely certain that what I say is true, that it's a welcoming neighborhood. So please have your work session, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and following Ms. Kropp, Dave Barta, Chuck Erlin, and Maura. Welcome.
Thank you. Sam Kropp, 1510 Lincoln Street. I'm a representative of Cascadia Wildlands. We're a regional nonprofit, but we're based here in Eugene, and we have around 10,000 members. And today I'm here to talk about Lane County's membership in the Association of ONC Counties and to encourage Lane County to withdraw that financial membership in that organization. The Association of ONC Counties, as many of you know, as Chandra talked about, has been recognized for quite some time as a secretive, unaccountable lobby group with a history of using county funding to advocate for increased aggressive logging on public lands. And while the AOCC has attempted to pass itself off as a somewhat benign organization representing the county's best interests, for too long the AOCC has operated in secrecy and has in fact had little public awareness and even less public accountability built into the process. And behind this veil of secrecy, the AOCC has consistently lobbied for aggressive logging and even the shrinking of beloved national monuments. As you all know, the AOCC is currently suing the Bureau of Land Management for not logging enough under a new clear-cut heavy management plan that's also being contested as being far too aggressive in its logging and recognized as going over the top with clear-cut heavy management practices. And they're claiming to do this all in the public interest. So what AOCC is not recognizing is that the public does not support irresponsible land management, and we definitely don't want to see any more backyard clear cuts. In fact, people are becoming more and more outspoken about these backyard clear cuts that we're starting to see, such as the Thurston Hills timber sale that Chandra mentioned earlier, which would clear cut over an extensive network of biking trails and increase fire risk for Thurston area residents for the next 40 years. Our organizations recently held a public lands town hall, which Commissioner Burney attended. Thank you for coming to that. And a lot of folks from the biking community, students, Thurston area residents came to talk about this concern around public lands management and clear cuts in our backyards, and basically to come around talking about the AOCC's role in that and why Lane County needs to pull out of that organization. So our community members recognize that it's unacceptable to contribute $30,000 in litigation funding while the AOCC is suing the BLM for more aggressive timber harvests. Our community members value clean water, we value recreation in our world-class outdoor destinations, we value fire safety, and we value a climate-stable future that we all know relies on healthy forests. So with these upcoming budget discussions that you all are about to go into, we hope that you can make some good decisions about membership in the AOCC and consider taking some decisive action while we can to stand up and stand with us for Oregon's public lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck, Maura, Chris, and Katja.
Hi, my name is Dave Barta. I live at 791 West 26th. When I was in high school, the most useful book I read, maybe one of the most useful anyway, was a book called How to Lie with Statistics. Last night I was looking at the AOCC website, and it is a prime example of how to do that. AOCC is an anachronism going back to the day when the ancient forest seemed endless and forestry was a labor-intensive industry paying community-sustaining living wages, and those days are over. Mechanized forest harvest practices mean the labor required is a fraction of it once was. The Northwest Forest Plan, which the AOCC decries on its website, was put in place because the forestry being practiced in Northwest forests was not sustainable and was having a devastating impact on our water and wild species, in particular salmon, which are an incredibly valuable resource and have continued to decline. AOCC has devolved into a single-minded lobbying group and advocate for an industry whose value to the people of Lane County has declined. It is inappropriate for our tax dollars to be supporting this organization. It is simply a business handout. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck, Maura, Chris, and Katja.
I'm Chuck Arford. Sorry about the printing there.
Okay.
I've enjoyed living in Lane County for the last 30 years. I have the good fortune of being represented by Commissioner Buck right now. I'm going to talk generally about climate change, just some facts and figures, statistics that have been reported in the mainstream press. With global carbon emissions increasing like a speeding train, 2.7% last year, the latest climate change science is grim. Global warming is happening faster and is thus far more advanced than previously thought. This is from the New Yorker magazine. The current heat retention from greenhouse gases is estimated to be the equivalent of 400,000 nuclear bombs, the size of the one dropped on Hiroshima, exploding every day. A 2016 Scientific American article states that the oceans have absorbed 93% of this heat. Of course they would, that's how physics works. Otherwise, the atmospheric temperature would have risen an unimaginable 97 degrees Fahrenheit. That's Scientific American. The laws of physics are real and immutable. Over the past 542 million years, there have been at least 5 mass extinctions, and they all closely corresponded with sudden increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide and ocean acidity. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is currently rising 100 times faster than any other previous natural increase, and oceans are acidifying faster than any time in the last 300 million years. Scientists agree we are either at the beginning of or in the midst of a 6th mass extinction. The current concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide has historically led to an increased temperature of 7 degrees Celsius, which could happen before the end of the century, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, that's the extreme edge of their report, yet a lot of climate scientists criticize that report as being overly cautious and conservative because it doesn't take into account tipping points or feedback loops. So if such a thing would happen, in just 80 years from now, vast areas of the Earth would become uninhabitable. That would be beyond catastrophic. The good news is if we act quickly and decisively, the worst outcomes of climate change can maybe be avoided. We need all ideas. We need the small ideas. We need the big ideas. We need all hands on deck. It is a global emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 time certain.
Okay, yeah, we have 2 time certains. Okay, we have 3 more people. Is there a preference to take the people now or to take them after we do the 2 time certains? I'll take suggestions.
Mr. Chair, perhaps if we'd mentioned it prior to the beginning of public comment that we would stop at 9:30 for the time certain, then people would have been prepared for that. Since they're not prepared for that, I would be in favor of continuing with the public comment
Okay,
until it
let's
was
do
finished.
that. Maura and Chris and Katja.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Maura Dewey, and I live in unincorporated Cottage Grove, Heather Brooks area. The newer commissioners may not know, this is about AOCC, that in 2009, Lane County considered dropping its membership in AOCC. A task force was appointed to look into the possibility of leaving the association. Shortly thereafter, then AOCC President and Douglas County Commissioner Doug Robertson appeared at a Lane County Commissioners meeting to argue for Lane County's continued membership. the county voted to remain a member with the stipulation that AOCC meetings would be open to the public and conducted under Oregon's open meeting laws. The following excerpt is from Lane County Board Order 9-10-28-7. 1. Meetings of the AOCC will be treated as public meetings in accordance with Oregon open meeting laws. On December 3, 2012, I attended a meeting of AOCC at Valley River Inn in Eugene, which was also attended by then Lane County Commissioner Faye Stewart. At the meeting, after the lunch break, I was cordially asked to leave the room for the private part of the meeting. I asked if an executive session was being called, and was told by Commissioner Robertson that while it was not an official executive session, it was an executive discussion at which non-members could not be present. I replied that it was my right to be present due to the Lane County Board Order. Commissioner Robertson informed me that AOCC had not agreed to any conditions and did not have to abide by open meeting laws, and that he did not recall any such stipulation. Then Lane County Commissioner Faye Stewart concurred that as AOCC is not a public body, I was not entitled to remain. When I again stated that I felt I had a right to be present and that I would remain unless forcibly removed, Commissioner Robertson decided that he would, after all, call an executive session. He did call an executive session in an ad hoc manner contrary to public meeting laws. It was not on the agenda, saying that anyone who is not an elected official must leave. Assuming he meant an elected official of AOCC, that is, a board member, of which there were 11, I did then remove myself. Imagine my surprise when only 3 or 4 of us actually left the room, with more than 30 people remaining. Perhaps he meant elected official, as in elected to any office whatsoever. However, several people who were neither county commissioners nor AOCC board members mysteriously did not leave the room. I strongly object to the non-adherence of open meeting laws by a body whose members' salaries are paid by public tax dollars. I object to public servants conducting business behind closed doors under the guise of executive sessions, which they are not. And again, I request that Lane County end its membership. AOCC has failed to adhere to the guidelines set out in Board Order 9-10-28-7 and should no longer receive county support in the form of dues, fees, or allotment of time by county commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris and then Katja.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Chris McAllister, and I'm here to help avert a crisis. I am here to help with the homeless options moving forward this summer and into this winter. I would like to use an analogy to kind of speak to how we have approached and how I'd like to maybe move forward. We respond very well in this county to crisis. When we have an issue, we step up and we take action. When a dam breaks, we don't decide which rivulet do we catch, which water do we try and capture and then get to the rest of it. We stop all the water. We hold it and then we find out what to do with the excess after we find out that the crisis is averted. Then we build a brick foundation. We build up that dam so that it can't happen again, so that we're ready to handle this next time. So I'd like us to build a foundation of bricks with shelter options right now this summer as we move forward. We're about to have some of our winter program fully end today. With that in mind, we have a lot of people who will be going back outside, who will be going to unmanaged camps, who will be going to our waterways that have recently been modified with rules on who can be there and how they can be there in order to protect our waterways through our governor's office. So we really need to be mindful that the options that were in existence last year are not here anymore. And so with that, we need to have more shelter options. We need to look at peer support specialists, mental health and substance abuse. If people want to say that that's part of our population that needs to be treated, then let's get the tools to do it. $10,000 will sort that. We can get this done. That will put 4 peer support specialists in each of your districts. I ask that you follow some of our examples in our county. leadership like patience in our crisis management, dedication like former Sheriff Trapp, and compassion like the late Mayor Sandra Larson. Have bravery to engage, dare to dream, and have courage to continue. And I made an acronym that represents my home that kind of speaks to what we need to do. Strengthen partnerships, reaching innovative new growth, and forging inclusive engagement, leading development. Springfield, take care.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Kohler. I'm from Cottage Grove, and Heather Buck is our commissioner. I just want to make it real short, but please, I'm here to request that you seriously consider referring our initiative. I volunteered with Freedom from Aerial Herbicides for many years, collecting thousands of signatures and talked to people all over Lane County and Florence and Springfield and Marcola and many other areas, and heard many stories and have had people contact us about getting sick from aerial spraying. And our family also experienced drift, which was how we got involved. I think I've shared that story many times coming here, so I'm not going to go into that. But please refer our ballot to the initiative, especially now that sprays have increased by threefold or more. There's a lot more cutting out there and a lot of spraying planned for this year, aerial spraying too. I'm also here in support of the work that 350 do, and they're calling to the board to adopt a climate action plan. It's crucial, it's important. I'm seeing it on our own farm. The weather now being so warm, it's, we're irrigating crops that we normally don't water at this time of the year. The ground is cracking that we normally don't see until August. It's changing, and it's serious. And the amount of trees that we lost this year too to the snow, it's pretty scary. So please do consider those two issues seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mokrajewski, in light of the time, what would you recommend for the next item?
Mr. Chair, the County Day folks had to leave because they're on a schedule for presentations. So I think is that right? Yeah, they had to leave, so I think you can move past that item. And if you'd, I believe that the folks from AFSCME are here, so if you want to take that item up for the 9:30.
Let's,
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So here we are again. A lot of people have come and spoken, and they deserve to hear back from us as opposed to not being able to say a damn thing, which we're not allowed to during public session. AFSCME, I understand, is time sensitive, and yet can you, Jim, Larice, Pat, is it possible to delay 10 minutes to let us respond, or are you unable to allow that to happen?
Our presentation's going to be very short.
Take your time. Are you sure? Absolutely. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
just to allow.
I was going to say after Mr. Mokrajewski gave his opinion, I was going to ask the commissioners if they had an opinion about what.
Oh, I apologize. I
That's
jumped
okay.
the gun again.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So let's go to our.
Thank you.
Our commissioner remonstrance and response to public comment. I'll just mention that certain topics such as real estate negotiation, litigation, or labor negotiation, where there's people that have been designated to negotiate with the county government, those topics are kind of off limits for us to comment on. But all other topics that have been raised during public comment can be responded to. Are there any commissioners that want to make a remonstrance? Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Couple quick things. First, 24/7 courthouse and 18 courtrooms. I just want to say that the courthouse we're planning includes the sheriff's offices, including the Emergency Operations Center. It also includes the DA's office. If you've ever been familiar with the staff from either of those organizations, they are a 24/7 operation. So that building will be in use for 24/7. It's not 18 courtrooms that have 12-person jury boxes in them. It's 18 flexible courtrooms that can be used for things like treatment court, where you need to have space for all the folks to sit together to work on each case. We currently have about 140 people that come once a month into our courthouse for treatment court. It's also about all the hearings, and it's not just court cases that need a courtroom. Every little hearing, every decision that a judge makes from the bench has to be done in a courtroom. So some of what you've heard and may have seen in the arguments in the voters pamphlet don't always have real basis in fact. We did a very extensive study with national experts to look at what court facilities we need to last the next 50 to 60 years and put them in a building that would last 100 years, and hopefully we can stretch that use out to the full 100. Just want to address that real quick. Secondary to that, I'd like to ask the board to ask staff. I think we've got a May 21st work session coming up on our climate issues that we've already been taking action on here at Lane County, kind of a report back from staff. And as we're looking at doing a work session on a climate action plan, if we could ask staff to look into the Energy Trust of Oregon has a program where they will actually help finance climate action plans. I understand that Hood River County has taken advantage of this. The folks over at Northwest Natural brought that to my attention, as that Energy Trust is funded by the investor-owned utilities. So it's making use of those funds, and I think it's a great way for us to maybe pay for part of the cost of developing that climate action plan. So I'd hope we can hear about that on May 21st when we bring that back up to the board. But I was really be interested to hear what Hood River County's experience is with utilizing those funds.
Okay, are there other commissioners that want to make a remonstrance? Go ahead, Joe.
First, I would like to share that all of this input does make a difference. You do now have a Board of Commissioners that unanimously agreed to have a work session on a Lane County Climate Action Plan, and that is moving forward. And that wasn't divisive. That was unanimous. I want you to know that. I also want you to know that these public sessions, honestly, I fight back tears sometimes. I really appreciate where everyone is coming from. If you take a step back from your individual issue, what you see is all things are connected. All things are impacting other things. I'm halfway through Uninhabitable Earth. My wife has read it, but let me share some of the contradictions I see, so perhaps we can move together as opposed to against one another more often. I want you to know that when I ran, I didn't run because I wanted to defend the current county practices. I wanted to work with people and modify some of them for the better. I want you to know that my wife has gone to some of the both pro and anti-timber industry, you know? I mean, so she was going to a day where she was going to be seeing some things hosted by the timber industry, who's been very gracious, by the way. She reached out to a gentleman, I don't know him, his name is Roy Keene, I want to say, who promptly dismissed and demeaned her because she wasn't the commissioner. And obviously she couldn't understand the complexity of these things. When all I did was ask her, could you get more information? Could you get that perspective before we move forward? And then when I did attend at the request of Chandra, and I'm really glad I did, the Oregon Wild and others discussion about the Thurston Cut, the first thing I was given was a thing that said that the new commissioners, you know, something to the effect that we're already learned that we have to play along with corporate interests or else we're not going to get reelected. I just want you to know that that is so offensive. And that is so anti bringing people together around issues that we need to work on together. So I want you to know that, that we are, as Commissioner Bozovich said, getting a report from staff about carbon reduction and mitigation efforts in this county within a month. We then are moving forward toward a Lane County Climate Action Plan work session. The courthouse as constructed, I'm not asking you, I'm not trying to persuade you one way or the other, but it sets a board order that provides for the first time a foundation for looking at increasing clean energy, increasing carbon reduction activities, increasing activities for living wages, looking at fair and flexible schedule, a variety of what I would call community benefits. So my plea to you and my request to you is let's work together and please tame the understandable instinct and angst to create divisiveness because of history, and that's my request. And I thank everyone for your testimony. Thank you.
I know we don't have much time, so I'll make this short and sweet, but I just wanted to react to Mr. McAllister's comments about winter strategies. You're absolutely right. Now is the time to talk about winter strategies. It will come upon us very quickly as time just flies nowadays. So I look forward to having those conversations, and we are discussing the TAC report implementation, and I look forward to having that presentation as well, because that will coincide with winter strategies for those that need it the most and the most vulnerable in our community. Second of all, I know Ms. McGee talked about compostable plastic, which was interesting for me to hear. And part of the climate action plan I hope to talk about in the future is product stewardship, end of life, responsibility for products, and how we as a county can react to that, given that we have to dispose of all that waste in our area. So I look forward to those discussions in the future.
Okay. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Three hard statements to follow, but thanks. First, Jay Mosley, thank you very much for being here this morning. I told you in the 90 seconds I had prior to this meeting starting that I've been working on that corner for a long, long time. My goal for that corner is actually permanent supportive housing. I think it's an ideal spot for potentially a women with children facility is what kind of is simmering out there. In the meantime, it is relatively unused. And we have other properties in the county that we're all aware of that are unused. And Conestogas have such a tiny footprint, such a tiny impact on the neighborhood, on adjacent businesses, whatever it may be. So bravo, thank you. And to you, Chris McAllister, spent the last hours of the day yesterday with you, and it seems the first hours of today with you. I look forward to working with you. 7 years ago, when I was first on this county commission, we didn't have winter strategies. We have them now, and the first time we looked at them, we started looking at winter strategies in November of the year that we were looking at winter strategies. Now we're looking close to a year ahead. It's better. It's not quite there yet, but thank you, Chris, for everything that you do. And for everyone else, thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to keep it very short.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to briefly comment on a few things. First is the utility of public comment. I agree with the expressions here that are in support of people coming in, giving their ideas. If their ideas have not been fully vetted or understood or communicated, coming back. I also believe that it's an important function of the government to listen, and I know that I'm looking forward to both our work session on what Lane County is doing about climate change, as well as what we could develop with the community or with the county government in terms of a climate action plan. I think that's a pretty exciting development, and one that we have not had thus far in our history. And true, it's coming at a time when some people think that it's even too late to do such things, but I think it's worth pursuing. In terms of the comment about the courtrooms in the new courthouse, well, first of all, we don't have any architectural plans for that building yet. We do have some scoping of it, and the idea that these courtrooms are simply for jury trials, and that's all is inaccurate. That we have talk to the circuit court about the multi-use purposes. When you have a drug court or a youth court or a veterans court, you need lots of space in those courtrooms. So it's not just, if you've ever been in a courtroom in another country, there's no jury box, right? We're the country that retains the jury trial right in our Constitution, and a lot of countries don't have that. So you're not going to see a courtroom of the size of our courtrooms. And I think that the way it's been presented is to say, oh, well, there are all these unused courtrooms. That is not really accurate. Another thing is on this Conestoga camp proposal, 13th and Tyler, I think that I'll be bringing that up under our future agenda items so we can have a briefing on it to make sure that the size is appropriate. I've been there several times. In fact, Ms. Mosley has taken me there, and I've been there at other times, and it seems like all the pieces will come together on that, and I'm really happy you came in for public comment, and I'm glad that we're going to maybe talk about doing a work session later today under item 10B. Okay, I think we're ready then to move to the AFSCME presentation. Okay, so at this time we'll call up Ms. Rivera and Mr. Dotson and any one you wish to bring up. This is item 7A, and as you're approaching, I'll read the agenda item. Please sit down at the table and welcome. This is a report and discussion, AFSCME Reflections on Workplace Health. Pat Dotson is the Chief Steward and First Vice President of Local 2831. Larice Rivera is President of Local 2831. And if one of you could introduce the people or who you brought, that'd be great. And please, as I understand it, you're going to take up to 15 minutes to make your presentation and welcome. And thank you so much for coming. This is a great moment for us. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
At this point, I'm going to declare a potential conflict of interest. I'm going to stay for the discussion. My son works in a unit that is a member of AFSCME. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. It's great to see you this morning. I thank you for our time on the agenda. Dennis Sando was our independent contractor that did the study, so he will be here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Larice. Appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. And I think that we can all recognize that sometimes it hasn't been the best in relationships up here between management and the union. So that's kind of why we wanted to do this. And we've met with Steve several times. I think every time we meet, we talk a little bit about relationship, and sometimes it takes an outside person to kind of take a look at things and give you an independent look at how things are going. I go back to when I was a kid, my brother and I used to fight like the Dickens over cheesecake that my mom made every week. We had a thing where he got to cut it one week, I got to cut it the next week. Every week was a fight. And finally, Mom intervened and said, you cut it, you pick which side you want. Wow, worked well. But it took somebody independent to look at that. She wasn't really independent because she hated us fighting, but anyway, it's no secret that our relationship with AFSCME and Lane County has not been good for some time. AFSCME leadership is very concerned about relationship, and we believe that Lane County management shares concern for their employees and, more importantly, their health. Recently, there have been many studies and reports that tell us that the health is not simply the health of an employee, but the health of an organization as a whole. It does not matter whether you're represented or non-represented. When we think of public health concerns, we generally think that smoking, obesity, immunizations, depressions, etc. But we need to take a look at the impact the workplace has on these issues as well. Our social connections are largely influenced by the institutions and settings where we spend the majority of our time. Here locally, an area of concern for all of us serving Lane County is the health and the safety of the workforce. Health and productivity are synonymous, so a healthy workforce is more productive and cost efficient than an unhealthy workforce. With this concern in mind, Local 2831 employees approved and hired an independent scientist to look at our workforce. While we could not afford to do the entire workforce, we asked some members of working in the community health center, clinics, and public health to tell us about the health of their workplace.
The employees at Lane County Community Health Center and Public Health serve our most vulnerable members in our community. These employees are dedicated to their jobs, their patients, and our community. For this reason, we decided to focus our study on the members at CHC. We asked some of the members working in the community health centers to discuss health in the workplace.
So I got involved in this many, many years ago. Don't even want to say how long ago. Became the chief steward in 2009. And I did that because I wanted to make a difference, and I thought we could improve it. And I feel like, at times we've improved a little bit, and at times we haven't. And so we're taking a step back. This is not about somebody saying this wrong, us doing this wrong. We own our part. I think Lane County owns their part. So looking at Dennis Sandow here, who came in and he just sat down with some employees, and he asked them some very basic questions. Just one question, actually. Tell me about the health of your workplace. And that's where this report comes from. It's largely based, I believe, on the Whitehall 2 report. Dennis has done work for many large corporations around, including Hewlett-Packard. And have you all got a chance to get a copy of the report and read it? Okay, so I think that's what we have here. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Sandow, who actually wrote the report, and see if we have any questions. Larissa, I think there was a little more you wanted to.
Yes. Typically, if we find a cause for concern for our own and others' health and well-being, an intervention is called for. The intervention we propose is from a local scientist practitioner, Dennis Sandow, who has studied productivity and well-being in the workplace since 1980. His proposal is simple. It would begin with the CHC, but it should incorporate all employees at Lane County. We need to identify an accomplishment that is valued by our community. The CHC managers and employees should identify the accomplishment that they are proud of because it benefited our community. Next, to invite those employees to a 30-minute one-on-one interview. The interviewer, Dennis, or any independent contractor, should validate the notes with each participant, code the interview data for consistent themes, map the social network of these contributing to the contribution, and present the themes to participants and managers, and adopt a plan to constantly improve the health and well-being of our employees and the workplace.
Okay, so Dennis, do you want to make some comments?
Yes. When we look into social epidemiology and look into what's happening in the workplace in terms of stress, lack of recognition, rewards, we realize that they constitute real health threats. Those who have low job control are more than twice as likely as having heart disease than those who have high job control. It's well established. The Whitehall 2 report specifies governmental organizations as organizations that are particularly vulnerable to this. The approach I take is homemade. This October will be my 60th year in doing research in workplace well-being. And the approach I take is also endorsed by Dr. Peter Schnall, a public health professional, medical cardiologist at the UC Irvine, who wrote the book Unhealthy Work, who calls for the use of action research as a mitigating process to roll back these health threats in the workplace. Seen as how I use qualitative research, not surveys, statistical analysis, et cetera, I think establishing my credibility, which I've never been able to do, had the opportunity to do before with you, is in order. After starting my research in 1979 that looked at people whose lives were at risk in backwards of institutions and employing them in a business I started in Central Oregon, I started realizing that the focus of well-being is a focus that we all share. We all like to live well. We like to live well ourselves. We like to live well together. In 1990, I began to bring together qualitative and quantitative research. That was a topic of my first book, Integration at Work, Multiple Research Methodologies. And I combined that with longitudinal productivity studies at NEC America. I took this work to Hewlett-Packard's Inkjet business unit, and in 2003, helped save the company over $200 million in reducing and eliminating quality escalations during their largest ramp-up of inkjet cartridges. Their worldwide quality manager says this about the work. The business results are stunning. Equally important, however, was the way employees and vendors felt about their role in the work. A feeling of well-being and accomplishment permeated the organization. Being at work was a joy. We were happy to know each other and work with each other. Senior lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Business said this about the work. Eventually, Dennis summarized all of this in a very beautiful kind of, to me, one-sentence articulation of the guiding spirit of what's always been there and all the work we really had the pleasure to be involved with. And that's the statement that all examples of sustained high performance are achieved only through creating social well-being. All examples of sustained high performance are achieved only through creating high levels of well-being. When I first saw this, I thought, wow. Other documentation, General Hayden, the director of the National Security Agency, commented on my work as presented by the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, Ms. Fiorina, and I, and called that understanding our social systems will lead us to improve relationships, decision-making outcomes, and health. Mind you, that was prior to 9/11. The father of social epidemiology and the father of all the research that is cited around unhealthy work, Professor Emeritus Lynn Syme out of the University of California, Berkeley, has called my work a paradigm shift in understanding social impact. And most recently, General McChrystal, in his 2015 book, Team of Teams, cited my book in his last chapter, and it's worth quoting from that last chapter. Insofar as organizations, armies, schools, governments, corporations are essential to solving the biggest problems we face, and the running of those organizations enables or disables their effectiveness, management determines the quality of the world we live in. So we know the health threat. It's psychosocial relationships in the workplace. We have cursory data, open-ended interview. There are no leading questions, no other purpose in asking people to reflect on the health of the workplace, which they did. All the interview notes were confidential, returned to the interviewees. They validated those notes before I analyzed them for reoccurring themes, which is a known qualitative research technique. And now that we know, are there actions we could take to improve the health and productivity of the workforce? And the answer is yes. And the evidence I've presented you, both from the public sector and private sector and government, has suggested that the approach that we're suggesting here has merit and has been adopted by our country's leaders in government, military, and corporations. Thank you.
Okay, do you have more that you want to present, or are you open now to questions from commissioners? What would you prefer?
Questions.
Okay, good. So commissioners, do any commissioners want to ask any questions or make any comments? Okay, Commissioner Bozovich.
So just quick question for Dennis. You spoke with 16 employees and kind of characterized some of the results of those conversations. Have you done similar interviews in any other sort of medical clinic setting and have an ability to compare the health of our employees compared to what kind of like, you gave a snapshot based on 16 people that were picked by the unions for you to interview, answering one question. How's that compare to health clinics like Peace Health at Mackenzie Willamette, other counties, other situations? Is it indicative of that industry, or is it indicative just of Lane County, the issues that were brought up in those interviews? There's nothing in here that gives me the ability to say, we've got a problem that's way beyond everybody else, or is this typical of the medical field and just the pressure that's going on in the medical field with, lack of employees and the competition to just fill positions, the demand on that, and the stress, the fact that you're dealing with people's lives and that stress that comes with it. I'm just trying to understand and put this in some perspective. So if you
Sure, that's an excellent question. I have done this work in the medical field. I documented how 5 African-American-led churches in the poorest neighborhoods in Sacramento, California, were reversing type 2 diabetes and heart disease. I used biometric data along with qualitative research. And I engaged the Sacramento County Director of Health and Human Services, Dr. Kasari, and the Regional Director of Health and Human Services for Region 9 in that research. I'm also currently talking to the Chief Medical Officer of Samaritan Health, and we're launching the same focus. What you have here, this is a really good question, by the way, and it's really important. What we have here and what I've documented through General Hayden, Carly Fiorina, General McChrystal, as well as the people on the ground at Hewlett-Packard and the people I've interviewed here, is a shift. It's a shift in how we manage organizations. We've accustomed ourselves to managing industrial-based organizations that optimize productivity through the manipulation of physical assets. We're in a knowledge age economy. We can't manage people as if they're physical assets. They're not. They're human beings. In a knowledge-based organization, we have to understand that the working conditions that require people to do their best work and put their best knowledge forward is contingent on the psychosocial relations in the organization. So I have found this to be a pervasive problem, affecting national security, affecting our military, affecting health, education, and the private sector. And every single one of my studies, it reveals that all the leaders comment that my work helps them transition from an industrial age management practice to a knowledge-based management practice. So these remarks aren't of an insubstantial N statistically. They're not of a selected population. This is very, very common data. Interestingly, when I asked the scientists who discovered the diagnostic for the H1N1 flu diagnostic in 2008, how they're able to diagnose that virus so quickly and develop an instrument for it, they reported just the opposite. Now, this is very interesting. This is what's being proposed. Let's look at the accomplishments that our public health workers create with management, those accomplishments that provide value. And let's take a positive approach and ask, how did you do that? Because this is the question. How do we do what we do when we work at our best? And those scientists told me that we are free to do our work. We supported one another. We recognized one another. And we're a family to be together. So they give you just the contrary evidence that was presented here. So this is a pervasive management issue. That's why my work's been cited by leaders in national security, the military, corporations, and from Dr. Singay at MIT School of Business Management. Great question.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, I know that one thing where, as we think about, empowering the employees out of these clinics, we've been recognized nationally, our federally qualified health clinics, for what we've done in reducing opioid use. And that came up from the staff. In fact, a particular pharmacist was one of the main people that pushed that. And we've achieved an incredible result of a 40% reduction in opioid prescriptions out of the clinics. So there is some level of being able to continue that, that sort of innovative, everybody's input is responsible. We also understand there is a stress involved in the health industry, and I think we're rolling out a pilot on mindfulness into the clinics from our employee wellness people that I'm hoping will help with some of this. I'm also looking forward to, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at our performance audit that's coming out tomorrow from our performance auditor. He interviewed 937 out of our 1,466 employees at the time, about a 64% sampling, asked 3 basic questions. Why'd you come to work for Lane County? Why are you still here? And what could Lane County do to retain you? So they're very open-ended questions, very similar to your very open-ended question. And if you have time, take a look at it. Dr. Creer, who prepared that audit, it's a scholarly piece of work.
Having invented the work that I do and developed it over 60 years, I haven't met anyone who does the work I do and is as well steeped in the background that I've developed. I'd be delighted to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'd like to say one thing that's really clear. This information comes from people. It's the criterion of validations being used here. When you look at people as physical entities, use a criterion of reliability, and you rely on statistics. That's an old way of looking at people. I use a criterion of validation, meaning I hold up a mirror to people, and that mirror has to be flawless. I only use their words. There's no conjecture in the data I present to you. What that means is that this will be predictively valid in the future, meaning that these conversations about lack of freedom, lack of recognition, lack of support, stress in the workplace will continue to happen. And a simple blood pressure cuff following the work of Dr. Peter Schnall out of UC Irvine will document high blood pressure rates in the workplace. Now the issue is that stress necessary or not? This data will continue to resurface. It won't go away until there's an intervention. And that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of leading social epidemiologists in the US and the UK and throughout the world. So action is required.
Okay.
No, Heather.
Heather, then Joe.
I just want to acknowledge that I think that there is merit in evaluating our social welfare within our whole county. Each coming from a business background and having staff myself in a much different type of setting, there's still a company culture and we have a county culture, and there's systematic ways in which people are trained to work within each culture, but then there's also this really intricate social system within each of them. Each department, I'm sure, has one. And as we are stressing, making sure that we're having a healthy county staff, medically speaking, there's also a lot of merit in talking about how our social systems within our departments are really functioning and working to relieve the kind of stress that you're pointing out here. Stress is, in my world, has always been a part of work, and managing that stress and what is actually necessary stress and which you're manufacturing is really important because the manufactured stress is where we really can come into play and reduce that to a point where we know that we are feeling like family. We know that we're all working together. And I'm really interested in knowing how we can improve our social systems within our staff. And this is kind of an interesting, I guess, start to that conversation, because I don't know if we've had those conversations prior to my presence on the board. But it's just as important as making sure that your blood pressure is low and that you're physically healthy. You need to be mentally healthy within your workplace as well. So, you know, I'm reading through it multiple times. I really wish we had a larger sample, because it is not very many people, and I don't know how they were chosen. But getting into the actual social structure and making sure that that is a healthy workplace, I think is valid.
And Commissioner, if I may, in 1985, my work revealed at NEC America plant that we actually live in a network of networks of conversations. A culture is a network of conversations. And I found that the workers at NEC were in a conversation about work, how to get more output, how to deliver more. But at the same time, they generated a social system, which I define as a network of relations where everyone accepts everyone else as a legitimate contributor to the well-being of the people that form that network. And I found that this is really evolving out of our preferences of how we live together. We like to support one another. We like to take care of one another. We like to be honest and open. We like to celebrate our accomplishments, whether they're private or professional. That this social system that you're talking about is our innate interest in conserving and expanding our well-being. And that well-being generates tremendous productivity. That's how we reached $200 million of cost savings within 9 months at Hewlett-Packard. We didn't rely on an organizational structure. We relied exactly on the social system that you're describing. That is a network of relations that can't be designed, it can't be managed, but it can be diminished by using control, by not recognizing people for the work that they're doing, and oddly enough, most simply, just not listening to people.
What did Pat?
Oh, just a couple of things to Pat and to Larice. Thank you very much. My background is in business, both nonprofit and private business. And some of the things that Mr. Sandow talks about are consistent with research that I conducted. I'm not a researcher. I commissioned research for both Jerry's and for Food for Lane County. And really, it is when the people who are doing the work, who best know how the work can be made excellent, have the greatest input on how to do the work, that is when excellence truly is achieved, whether it's nonprofit, private, or I hope in government work also. That is my desire, my hope, once again, my background is not with government work. So I'm excited about the discussion that we're having right now. And I think that making certain that people who are doing the work are recognized for the work that they're doing. And if people have good ideas surrounding the work, back in the olden days, we were Deming fans. And Deming pushed the decision-making down to the level of the work being done in a manufacturing environment. Not unlike what Mr. Sandow's talking about right now. It's not unique, but it is something that really does work, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's retail, or whether it is getting food to people who are hungry. So I'm hoping that we can not convert that, but make certain that that translates well to the government environment also. So once again, thank you. It's a very brave step that you took bringing this forward. It's very brave, the path that we're charting for the future. Thank you.
May I? I'm sorry. I've enjoyed sometimes and learned from watching Commissioners Farr and Buck having to identify past relationships with various people, so I have no conflict of interest. However, I would like to share, it's nice to see you, Dennis. 25 years ago, I commissioned Mr. Sandow, as it turns out. I hate being this old. And his work was, in fact, what Commissioner Farr just discussed. It was researching the degree to which decisions were made at the point of product delivery or service, correct me if I'm misstating this, with the assumption that that's where the best input for changes in culture could occur. And in fact, it was largely based on Deming's work and others, and it was pushing organizations to become more flat. That was 25 years ago. So when you walked up, I don't, first, thank you, AFSCME, because I don't see any, us, them kind of attitude here. What I see, correct me if I'm wrong, is a different take on workplace health. And I know unions, it's wages, hours, and conditions, and I see this as conditions, but also thank you, because it's not at all inconsistent with conversations I've had with Lane County management about truly wanting insights into how to make Lane County a better place to work, sincerely. So if I may, let me share with you, you're not going to expect this, let me share with you that the good and the bad here, based on my experience with Mr. Sandow. The good is that he, in my experience, has yielded tremendous insight that others haven't. The bad, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's true, is he has absolutely no institutional loyalty. His loyalty is to what he perceives as the truth. I think, Dennis, you would probably say, no, it's to the truth. And so that creates its own dynamic tension. And that's a healthy tension, but I look forward to seeing, what's next. I don't know what's next. I don't know how this impacts collective bargaining. I don't know. But what I would like to know is what's the intent here? What are we trying to accomplish other than a profoundly insightful discussion? Is that okay to ask that question?
Sure.
I want to be clear, this isn't just for our members. This is for the betterment of all of Lane County, for the workplace, the employees, and the community. It's not, let's just figure out what's wrong between AFSCME and Lane County. This is, how can we make every work site better, healthier, every employee more productive, more efficient, supported, things like that.
I'm interested in knowing whether the results of this can be used outside of the 16 people that were interviewed and the function of, say, the clinics, both the provision of medical services to people as well as the public health component of Lane County government. Is this something that you would see in any setting, whether it's the road crew or the sign shop or the Lane County Fair staff? I mean, what do you think are the applications of this outside of the people that were actually interviewed?
Another great question. There's a real concern I would have if I were in your position and I managed Lane County. Whether we human beings, we always struggle with whether we see an illusion or whether we perceive a reality. That's how we're constituted. That's our biological fundamentals. And so you have to hold this data in that light. These are perceptions people have of the psychosocial relationships that occur during their work. The greatest harm, the greatest worry I would have is under these conditions, people don't talk. They don't talk with one another. They don't talk with newcomers. You have, some of these people became heroes of mine. Commissioner Bozovich, you had mentioned the response to drug addiction, to the opioid crisis. I talked to some of these people. They were heroes of mine. They don't want to talk. So where's young people going to get their knowledge? Where are the new people coming in going to find their leadership? Who's going to be their mentor when someone puts their head on their desk and says, I'm a short timer, I just want to get to retirement? There's a knowledge problem here. That knowledge is not being shared. I'm not advocating doing more of this to find out the pervasiveness of the problem, because that delays an ethical response. An ethical response happens when we care for one another. What I'm suggesting is to use reverse engineering. Ask, what have we accomplished that we're proud of? Realize that people are emotional beings, not just rational. They're emotional. And when we find that accomplishment, conduct an open-ended interview using qualitative research, techniques like mine, to ask, how do you do what you do when you generated this accomplishment? Employees will articulate the answer to this problem for you. They will tell you what the preferences are for them to work well together, and then just follow that. Seriously, this is awfully, awfully simple. I can make it very complex if we want to go down the rat hole of why did Dr. Deming talk about adopting new philosophy and knowledge epistemology, et cetera, we don't have to do that. That's not of interest here. The ethical action is to go in, find accomplishments that are valued by you, the whole organization, whether it be a road crew, a sheriff, or a medical clinic, and ask the employees who did that, how did you do that? And then roll up those themes, understanding that they're the preferences for how people do their best work together. And then plan on doing more of that. Instead of change, I'm a big fan of conservation. Let's not worry about what to change. Let's worry about what we want to conserve, which is health and productivity and performance in the workplace.
Do you have like a top 10 list of things to do that you would recommend?
Yeah. One, identify a valued accomplishment.
Okay.
2, invite people to brief 20 to 30-minute interviews that are open-ended that only ask one question. How did you accomplish this? Validate that data by returning those notes to every employee so they can make sure that I'm not changing the notes. It's not Dennis's view, it's really their view that goes forward. Organize all of those notes into themes, as you see here. What is reoccurring? What do people continue to mention? And then realizing that those themes are the preferences that people have for social well-being that brings about their highest productivity. Plan on conserving that in the culture.
Okay.
This is what I've done at the National Security Agency prior to 9/11. This is what I've done at Hewlett-Packard. I've done the work in China, South America. We see the same data over and over and over. We like to work and be recognized for our contributions. We like to be free when we're at the task of doing an important job, to organize our work, to ask for help. We like to support one another. So the method's really very clear. Analysis paralysis is your enemy. Ethical action should happen quickly, sooner than later, because delay is denial.
Okay, good. Any closing comments from the three of you?
I'd just like to thank all of you for the questions, great questions, and allowing us time here to come and present this to you today. And you know our ask. I mean, this isn't something that's a bargaining issue or a PECPA issue. It's about family, and we should all be family. Okay, I got a lot of brothers and sisters out here, and they all need to be felt like they are part of us, including management, non-management, all of us. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the presentation and report and the perspective. Thank you so much. So I think we have Mr. Kyler available at this time. So Mr. Kyler, please come forward. This is item 7B, report and order 19-4-30-7, Legislative Committee update in order in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee. Alex Kyler, Intergovernmental Relations Manager, is here. And because of the fast-moving legislative picture, there are updates since the Legislative Committee meeting. And do you have handouts you want to give to us?
They should be, Commissioner Sorensen, they should be posted.
Okay.
And I understand there's some question about handing out things that have not been posted. So I have them ready to
Well, if they're
hand out.
posted, then let's, hand them up.
Would you rather have the handout?
Yeah, I would.
Do you want me to? Sure.
So we're all looking at the same thing. And as I mentioned, the Legislative Committee met, but since the Legislative Committee meeting, there has been updates and fast-moving legislative pictures. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Kyler.
Thank you, Commissioner and Commissioner Sorensen and members of the commission. So you are getting 3 handouts here that give you an update to the items that, at least some of the items we discussed during our April 19 Legislative Committee meeting. And pardon me, I'm going to grab the extras because I need some for my presentation.
Handed out one too many.
Yeah, good luck. It's taken a while.
So do we each have 3, one called legislative update, one called state budget priority, and one with green and yellow and white?
I have none.
So we'll get everybody a copy of everything. Okay, so do you want to take them in order, or what would you like to do?
Chair Sorensen, I'd like to take the green and yellow one first.
Okay.
Okay, so what you have in front of you are the bills that we discussed at Legislative Committee, and I have on the very right-hand side provided an update to this. You'll see down at the bottom there were a couple bills we did not get to, and I just wanted to highlight for you, fourth from the bottom, House Bill 2530. I would, if possible, ask you to take a position on that today, because there is a hearing coming up, and I've been contacted by staff who would like to submit some testimony for that bill. But starting
veterans?
Veterans, yeah. Yep. Starting at the top, we took another look at House Bill 2007. This is the so-termed diesel bill. You'll note that that bill actually does have a public hearing tomorrow, or excuse me, tomorrow in House Rules. From what I've been able to ascertain is that the amendments to that bill have not been published yet. But what we're expecting with the diesel bill, I don't know if we'll see this, but what I've been led to believe we will see is that there will be, the bill addresses medium-duty and heavy-duty trucks and emissions from them. Medium-duty trucks are like 14,000 pounds, licensed at 14,000 pounds payload, and heavy-duty trucks are 26,000 pounds. My understanding is that the medium-duty trucks will only be regulated in the metropolitan region, and that the heavy-duty trucks will be regulated statewide, and that this is a piece I'm the least clear on, but there will be a carve-out for local government fleets that if they have heavy-duty trucks, those trucks will also, or heavy-duty vehicles, those will not be regulated.
Have you been informed that Jackson County requested that they be put in, and so it'll be Jackson County and the Metro on the medium-duty trucks, or just the Metro?
I have not been told about that.
Okay, all right.
So that's what I know as of right now. The next 5 bills were all positions that were recommended through the Mental Health Advisory Committee, which held a meeting last week, April 17, that I attended and went through a variety of bills with them. And a couple of them had to do with how the state is moving forward to develop a drug and alcohol policy plan. And then there were several that really tried to get at workforce issues and making sure that that fees for service for behavioral health are on a par with fees for service of mental health services. And House Bill 2206, we added to the committee. This is allows for building officials to more easily inspect buildings after emergencies. I asked this to be put on the committee agenda because we had actually had some interest in creating that as a priority during the 2017 legislative session, where our building official was pretty interested in that issue. And so when we found this bill, he asked that we put it on legislative committee.
Mr. Chair, on those 5 bills, if I may. Yep. And Alex, you did a great job at the MHAC last week. We lost a quorum about halfway through Alex's presentation, so the MHAC wasn't really able to make a official recommendation, but they supported the work that Alex is describing here. Is that correct characterization?
Yeah, that is correct. And I guess I put, under notes, I put MHAC recommends this bill. Mm-hmm. If that's going to be a problem, I suppose we can reformat that. But
based upon the discussion, Alex, I see no problem with that.
Yeah. Couple of pairs of veterans bills there that are sort of interesting. One, 2886, which has now passed the House and is in Senate rules for tomorrow, looks to be the one that is actually moving. While the other one did pass the Senate, there is still nothing scheduled on the House side. So I'm not exactly sure. I put both of those. It was sort of interesting to see Senate Bill 332 advance because the sponsor is the minority leader, and so my theory is that that's a priority for Senator Barchiger, and that the body, was being deferential to his position and passed it out. Senate Bill 507. This was a bill that was a pretty big concern for the sheriff early on, and I think Commissioner Bozovich has been tracking on that bill as well. There's my understanding is there's some amendments to this bill that will very much narrow it to certain kinds of diagnosable diseases using a standard that exists for kind of psychological disorders, and that was making people feel much better about that measure.
There's no amendments posted.
We also looked at 2786 deputy DAs going into PERS. This is a sort of a controversial bill because it's going to cost counties quite a bit of money, and there's some talk about whether that will reach the threshold of an unfunded mandate. It really depends on what the vote count is at the end of the day, because if a bill passes by greater than a 3/5 majority, then it's exempt from future claims against an unfunded mandate. And then, like I said, I'm asking that you add 2530 as a support position. This one is, what it would do is that it's just a way to push information out to veterans, and particularly when they might be in the most need, when they're in a bit of a housing issue, so that this bill will provide that there's materials that get pushed out that are sort of specific to veterans and assistance programs that exist for veterans, particularly related to housing. So I'm happy to entertain any other questions about the bills that we discussed and didn't discuss, if you have questions.
I will just start by saying I would favor moving the did not discuss comment to support on 2530. That's the bill that would provide information to veterans on housing-related notices. And then I guess I would be more inclined to go with monitor on the remainder of the did not discuss items. I'll just add one thing on the PTSD bill, the Senate Bill 507, is that our legal counsel was concerned about the presumption of police officers testifying in criminal cases and deputy sheriffs who would then be cross-examined because of their presumed PTSD, and that would undermine their effectiveness in testifying. So I think we changed it to monitor. On the first one, I did ask about the Jackson County and the Clean Air Advocates wanting to include Jackson County in the medium-duty trucks as well as the Metro. And if that's the case, part of our, and it does say support with amendment, but I'd like to, get us supporting the medium-duty as well as the heavy-duty truck regulation on the diesel emissions. It's not really stated more detail, but that's my perspective. And I'd like to open this up to any other comments on how to have a motion for these, all these support, monitor, and the do not discuss, and moving them to at least a category of support, monitor, or oppose. Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you all know, Commissioner Sorensen and I serve on the committee that Alex presents his findings to, your legislative committee. And I agree with much of the stuff that the chair has stated. On 2530, it has minimal fiscal impact. Now, both Senator Sorensen and I know from experience that minimal impact means typically minimal impact to the state. Doesn't really consider what local impact may be. Do you have any comment on that?
I'm sorry.
It's a fiscal impact on 2530A, which has been described as a minimal fiscal impact. Oh. Yeah, which once again, former senator and former representative, we know that means to the state, not necessarily to local governments.
Right. And my assumption is that the fiscal impact on that bill will be due to printing of materials, distributing those materials, for example, to county service officers, and then when making sure that those notices then get delivered to the actual veterans who are experiencing the housing issue. So my sense is that the fiscal impact will either be from printing new materials, which they may say we've already got the materials, or it's just the distribution. But for whatever reason, it did get pushed into Ways and Means, or at least suggested that it was going to go to Ways and Means because of the fiscal impact. You'll note that that order to Ways and Means has now been rescinded. And so whoever must have been one of the proponents of the bill made a case to the Speaker's office to ask that order be rescinded. And that's why we're now seeing it as without a referral to Ways and Means.
And once again, the concern there is no fiscal impact to the state. However, the enforcing bodies potentially are going to have impact simply to enforce and to monitor the enforcement. I'm in favor of it. I think move to support, I agree with that, but bear in mind that no fiscal impact does not necessarily mean we're not going to pay something.
Correct.
Okay,
Commissioner,
any other comments on?
Commissioner Sorensen and Commissioner Farr, I mean, that typically a fiscal impact statement, if it does have a local government impact, will indicate that. And sort of the AOC mechanism has been, if it's really, really potentially an unfunded mandate, there's ways to make sure that message gets delivered to fiscal.
Thanks.
Okay, okay, Jay.
Thank you. So I'm really concerned about SB 507. I'm looking at it online. I'm not seeing a set of amendments, but I guess maybe what I saw originally might have been just an LC. It's still, I'm not seeing clearly that somebody couldn't work for a week as a volunteer firefighter and come up with a claim 20 years later. The timing of claims and all that doesn't seem that was a real concern with the original bill. The original concept was it didn't seem to have a clear, somebody works as a, for Lane County for 6 months as a sheriff's deputy and can claim 20 years later that something that happened during that 6 months was the reason for their PTSD claim. It's a complete flipping of how the system works, for these kinds of claims. There's the only place we have an presumption of certain things is with firefighters and certain cancers that are tied to inhalation of smoke. That's the only place in our system we have this, and this is kind of flipping the whole system upside down and saying, we're going to presume that your claim's correct, and now it's up to the employers to prove the employee's wrong. And I just, I can't, besides the complication it starts to put on questioning testimony from public safety officials in court, because now they're presumed to be suffering from PTSD just because of their jobs, versus, what was talked about was working on wellness and mindfulness in the workplace and trying to tack it before people suffer from PTSD and dealing with those things. So I have a real problem with just monitoring that. I think AOC took an opposed position on this, so I don't know if that's changed or not.
Commissioner Sorensen and Commissioner Bozievich, are you looking at there's a -7 amendment?
I am looking at SB 507.
Okay,
And
so
when I looked at it online, there were no amendments in the text.
if you look under the navigation, there is an amendments tab.
Okay.
You'll
Usually
see
don't have
there's
it.
a proposed, there's a
There's a
proposed.
-7. I mean, it's still, I'm still really concerned any presumption, is flipping the system. There was some justification, and even the ones for firefighters had limitations where claim had to be filed within a certain amount. You had to have worked a certain amount of time as a firefighter before you could make that claim. It was a bad concept, and no matter how you amend it, if there's still this presumption built into it, it's the wrong way to go. Yeah. It's flipping our system of providing, workplace claims, for disability and other issues. So to me, it's a real concern. So I'll note that to the board. On HB 2007, I testified on an early version of this almost 4 years ago. This is a bill looking to solve a problem we don't have. You can't build and purchase an unclean diesel right now. The fleet's turning over. It's as far as our air shed goes, as far as particulate matter, PM2.5, and the the PAHs, which is the polyaromatic hydrocarbons that they're concerned about. The largest contributors to our air shed for those two constituents are wood smoke and wildfire. Diesel smoke is a tiny piece in our state. And it's getting smaller and smaller as newer clean diesel trucks are put on the highway. All this does is mandate accelerating replacement of fleets by the private sector and public sector. It's going to cost people money that's really doesn't have a corresponding, that cost benefit and health benefit isn't there. So I don't know what amendment you're referring to when you say support with amendment, if it's to make it voluntary, but basically it sounds like the amendment's actually to make this statewide instead of just focused on Multnomah County, which was the way the bill originally came out. And if Jackson County wants to opt in, that's fine. I do like that it does opt out local governments, because my biggest concern was we were going to suddenly have to replace our, the trucks that haul from our transfer stations to Short Mountain, and all of our dump trucks in our fleet, and multiple other trucks. But this is really a solution looking for a problem to solve. Already been solved by EPA years ago.
Commissioner Sorensen, Commissioner Bozovich, the support with amendment came, actually, we've looked at this bill twice now in legislative committee, and what we had talked about, as I recall at any rate, was the amendment was to ensure that it was limited to the metro area. This right now is the first time I've heard of the Jackson County addition.
If they wish to opt in, that's up to the Jackson County Commissioners, but it's just such an unnecessary piece of legislation.
Okay, and what about Jay, I'm specifically asking, what do you think about all the other ones, like the Veterans Assistance info?
The 2530, I'm fine going to a support on that. It's not a major change.
Okay.
It is another sort of mandate from the state to provide additional paperwork to people, but I'm not objecting to it, because it is to try and benefit veterans that might find themselves in a situation of being foreclosed or having other issues with loans. So that's fine. I'm fine with the positions on everything else. I just feel that the support on HB 2007, I'd be happy to change that to monitor, and I'm really concerned about, I don't mind just monitoring Senate Bill 507, because at least we're not supporting it. But I still have really great concerns about that. And I know a lot of the public safety, the Special Districts Association, and everybody else is really concerned about that presumption of PTSD.
Okay. I'll just mention that I believe that the purpose of that the local delegation, Manning, Holvey, Beyer, the reason that they are looking to have a presumed PTSD setting in the workers' comp claim arena for public safety employees, that the overall reason is that the veterans claims and claims involving exposure to, let's say, Agent Orange in Vietnam, or certain types of cancers that develop, that instead of making the claimant prove that the cancer was caused by their exposure to, let's say, Agent Orange, or like in the workers' comp system in Oregon, the firefighter who gets the certain type of cancer, it is to reverse the claim process and say, well, we are, as a state, we are going to presume certain types of PTSD. And I agree with you, it should be narrowed, but I think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid the problem of people coming in who can't prove a specific PTSD, and yet they've been a firefighter or a police officer, and they have had, in the course of their work, things that expose them, that cause them to get PTSD. I think that's what they're trying to accomplish, so.
The unfortunate thing is yes, I understand why they're doing it, but what it does is makes it swings the pendulum way too far. And, a lot of our public safety and first responders are former military. So is that PTSD due to their service in the military, or is it due to their service at Lane County? But under this rule, Lane County would be 100% responsible for that.
And the legislative committee said, look, some people are for it, some are against it. Why don't we say we want to monitor it? So that was the.
Yeah, and that's I'm just saying we need. I'm okay with monitor for now, but I really was a strong opposed as this was originally written, and I'm willing to modify that to monitor, just as I'm kind of a little bit leery of us having anything that says support on 2007.
Okay, so what you have in front of you then, board, is the green, the yellow, and the ones that are blank, all of which would be monitored except for 2530, which is the Veterans Assistance info, and that would be support. So are we ready to have a motion or further comments? Further comments, Commissioner?
No, just quick clarification, if I may. Alex, help me with this, if you would. 2007?
Yeah.
I think you've said that that support with amendment is the recommendation. Could you clarify that amendment is specific to Multnomah County?
I wish I could, but at least as of this morning, the amendment hadn't been printed or where I could see it.
Yeah.
But people who are closer to that bill that I work with have told me that's what's in what they expect to see coming out. But they were,
Metro only and local governments exempted.
yeah.
So if we approve this, we're approving it on the basis of that understanding?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Which is, I think this bill was on our first legislative committee meeting right out of the gate. So, I mean, we've been aware of it for a while and sort of waiting to see how it evolved.
And it's apparently going to rules on May 1st, so it'll be changed yet again.
Thanks.
And we will see, at some point tomorrow, we will see an amendment.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't print them right until the meeting.
Yep.
I have a motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then I'll call on you right after that. Yeah.
If you wish to speak prior to the motion, then my motion will be then to accept the recommendation of the Legislative Committee with the HB 2007 remaining support with amendment until we see the nature of the exact wording of the amendment, and then changing 2530 from did not discuss to support. So as printed, with the exception of 2530, which will be changed to support.
And the rest will be monitor.
And the rest will be monitor. Thank you. Yeah, the did not discuss will be monitor.
Okay, is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Farr, second by Commissioner Buck to support all the items listed with support, monitor all items listed as monitor, and under 2986, that'll be monitor rather than do not discuss. And the rest will be, that'll be monitor.
2530 is support.
And 2530 will be the support, and the rest will be monitor. Okay, so moved by Commissioner Farr, second by Commissioner Buck to that effect, and Commissioner Farr first, and then Commissioner Buck second.
I have nothing to the motion. Thank you.
Okay.
Pass.
Okay, anything further? Okay, no further debate requested. We will move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0, and the committee's recommendations have been modified by board motion. And so now I see there's a couple more memos here. Alex, what would you like to say about those?
Well, the first one is an additional 1921 state budget priority. This is I just brought this up because there had been a couple of emails from the University of Oregon this week at least to some commissioners and some staff at the county seeking testimony to be provided to support a $12 million capital request that the governor has made to support what's called the Shake Alert system. Shake Alert is a product out of the University of Oregon that we have supported previously. You'll see in the memo that we've got a couple of different priorities, one that's very specific about funding for the early build-out of Shake Alert system. And so rather than sort of try to figure out, okay, should I be writing a letter on behalf of Commissioner Bozovich or on behalf of our emergency manager, I just thought I would bring it to the full board this morning and ask that we would be able to write a letter from the board as a whole in support of this.
Okay, well, it sounds like a positive thing, so I'll take a motion to.
So moved.
Okay, so it's been moved by Commissioner Bozovich to approve the recommendations of Mr. Kyler regarding making a state budget priority, the $12 million capital request for a multi-hazard alerting system. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And now you have the legislative update.
Just a quick update. Usually I bring you sort of a list of where we are with our specific priorities. This is a little bit different because this last week has been sort of different. But I did want to let you know that 2321, House Bill 2321, which was one of our priority bills, actually has now passed both chambers and is on its way to the governor's desk for signature. So that was pretty cool to see that move through. I also wanted to just highlight House Bill 3063, which was in the news a lot last week, is the vaccination bill. Yeah. This was an issue that has been in front of the legislature several times before, and essentially at issue has been the existing law provides for a religious and philosophical exemption for individuals who are getting vaccinations, depending on what age, either for yourself or for your children. And those two exemptions are being eliminated in 3063 as it's been amended. So it's gone quickly through the Ways and Means process and is now awaiting its first vote on the floor of the House. We expect that will come maybe even this week to see that continue to move through. This was discussed, I believe, on April 11th at the Public Health Advisory Committee, and I think that Commissioner Farr was there. I believe that advisory committee made a position to endorse House Bill 3063, so I just wanted you to know that I did monitor that bill as it was moving through. Pretty fascinating issue, huge public policy. There was a lot of media coverage about the bill.
And to that bill, if I may, Mr. Chair, there was a significant testimony at the Public Health Advisory Committee to not support it, but the PHAC unanimously supported it.
Okay.
And then just an update on, there's been quite a bit of talk about a revenue package in Salem, and that revenue package looks to me like it's shaping up as House Bill 3427. It's a bill that came out of the Joint Committee on Student Success last night and will be heading to the floor. It will take a 3/5 majority vote to implement or to pass through that chamber. If you recall, Joint Committee on Student Success was a committee selected with members from both the House and the Senate, and they toured the state, sort of modeling their work after the lead up to the transportation package that passed last session. And so they heard a lot as they went around the state, and notably quite a bit about behavioral health issues. One of the reasons why I think the Mental Health Advisory Committee was particularly interested in some of the bills that we'd brought to them last week.
And there is a preemption in that bill to forbid cities and counties from passing any kind of tax or any kind of, could you explain that to us?
From passing a gross receipts tax.
just grocery receipts? Because the language that I was provided seemed to say, well, it did prohibit a gross receipts tax, but then it used a broader language like, and no other taxes.
I'll have to review that because I was only able to talk to a couple people about it this morning. I do know that, and I just have gotten a document because the League of Oregon Cities has put out a list of more discretionary city revenue sources. And my understanding is that Representative Nathanson testified, or at least spoke to the media about, while there is the preemption that you've described, Commissioner Sorensen, there are still other ways that local governments may utilize. I think it's worth us probably keeping an eye on. We may see this get referred. I mean, I don't think this story is far from being final.
What is the relationship between these preemptions and the overall purpose of the bill, which is to have student success? What's the reason that we would have these preemptions?
Well, my understanding, Commissioner Sorensen, is the reason for the preemption is that there is concern, particularly by the grocery industry, that local governments will pass whatever you want to call them, wellness or anti-obesity kinds of taxes,
Like
particularly
maybe
for
like,
sugar
or soda tax.
Yeah. And that they had, I believe that in some of the work that they've done, they've actually tried to get some of those sorts of preemptions passed proactively. So my assumption is sort of the highlight of the media coverage was that Oregon Business and Industry went to neutral as a result of concessions that were made. I don't know the details of those concessions, but very likely a lot of times industry really likes to see a preemption to get to neutral.
Okay.
So that's what I know. I think it's, I'll continue to report back on it, but that's one of the really big issues that's hanging out there. And the legislature has talked about wanting only to take a couple of tax votes. So this will probably be one of them. And what remains to be seen is how that will affect other potential tax votes like cap and trade, like tobacco tax.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like we are done unless commissioners have any further comments or questions or anything further from you, Mr. Kyler. Seeing none, we will move to our item 7C, and this is our 30-minute program work session on opportunity zones. Sarah Means, our Community and Economic Development Manager, for at least
Another day?
6 more hours.
24 more hours.
Oh, okay, you're on a
24
24-hour
hours.
clock,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Penultimate day here.
But who's counting, right?
So,
Not me.
and I see that our county assessor, Director of Assessment and Taxation, Mike Coles, has joined us. And so, Ms. Means, why don't you lead us in this Opportunity Zones discussion?
Thank you, Chair Sorensen, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity. I do have Assessor Coles and Alex Kyler joining me here, just as in case there are any questions that I'm not capable of answering related to taxes or legislation, because this topic has a little bit to do with both of those topics. And so I'm going to do a disclaimer right off the bat. I'm not a tax attorney, nor am I an accountant. And those two professions are really professions that dig deep into opportunity zones and what's happening here with this particular mechanism. And so I just want to put that disclaimer out there right now. I'm going to keep this pretty high level for a couple of reasons. One, I should not be talking about things that accountants, tax accountants, and attorneys talk about. Two, this is somewhat of a moving target still. And so we don't have all of the answers as of today and probably won't for another number of months. And so I'm going to keep it pretty high level, get you up to speed as to where we are, what has transpired over the last 18 months or so, and then hopefully it'll provide you with a good foundation and potentially opportunities for further discussion in the near future. So just a very brief overview. Opportunity zones were created as a result of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act coming out of the federal government. They're really designed to drive long-term capital into low-income communities. And really, it is just, what it is a mechanism, not unlike enterprise zones. I think you're more familiar with that sort of mechanism. It's different, but it is a structure that allows for capital gains liabilities to receive some favorable tax treatment for investment into qualified opportunity funds that are certainly certified by the Treasury Department. Opportunity funds use the capital invested to make equity investments in businesses and real estate opportunities within the as opportunity zone. And just for reference, here in Oregon, the governor's office asked Business Oregon to really run the process that we'll be talking about around opportunity zones, the nomination process, that is. Ultimately, it was the governor's decision in terms of nominating the zones here in Oregon. So again, potential for significant tax savings on medium to long-term investments in disadvantaged communities. Each zone, what is a zone, right? It's a census tract. It's in the entirety of a census tract. So, and these census tracts must meet the definition for low-income community in terms of median family incomes or poverty rates. And so there were some very specific definitions around poverty rates or income that automatically would eliminate a certain number of census tracts from even being considered in eligibility. These designations are in effect until December 31, 2028. Currently, federal law does not provide any opportunity to change or add zones. And I will say, the most recent set of rules actually dropped about a week ago, a little more than a week ago. And it's my understanding that there was some shift in terms of thinking around this this timeline. The new zones now provide for more of a rolling timeline. So instead of saying everything ends on December 31, 2028, it's now saying if you make an investment, let's say in 2025, you would be able to use or exercise the benefit of an opportunity zone for up to 10 years, even though it extends beyond 2028. This slide is really just to emphasize that this is meant to be a long-term investment. So you'll see a series of tiers in terms of what the benefits will be if provided, for how long an investor might leave their investment in a qualified opportunity zone. So the longer you leave an investment in the zone, in theory, the greater the benefit. Again, these sorts of details are, I think there's a number of local accountants and attorneys that are digging into this work and really would be more qualified to talk to you about the details around the actual benefit over the long term for investors. So a little bit about, Oregon, opportunity zones in Oregon. For reference, there are 834 census tracts in Oregon. 300 of those were considered low income and met the threshold that would be considered for opportunity zone eligibility. The way the rules came down, only 25% could be nominated to the federal government by the governor. And so 86, that's where the number 86 comes from. 86 total zones in Oregon. There are 5 in Lane County, and they're all within Eugene and Springfield. And actually let me go back. That first slide, that actually represents the opportunity zones in Lane County. So you'll see one in West Eugene. The 2 zones that are in the middle are really downtown core, riverfront, and then Glenwood is part of the opportunity zones, and then downtown Springfield. I will say that we nominated a number of census tracts across the county. I know that we nominated tracts in Florence, in Oak Ridge, in Cottage Grove, and even a few more, actually. And these were the ones that were eventually rose to the top and were elevated by Governor Brown's office to the Treasury Department. So, and just for reference, you know, thinking about projects that could potentially take advantage of something like this, I've reached out to a couple of individuals that I know here locally, and so projects that are within these zones might include the riverfront development, City of Eugene. Certainly, I think there was an unveiling of the steam plant project last week. That's certainly something that might be of interest. Glenwood, the whole Glenwood redevelopment opportunity is certainly in the mix, given the designation of the Glenwood Census Tract. So there's a number of projects that could
Have
actually.
names? Do the 5 have names?
The census tracts
Yeah, the zones.
or the zones?
They do.
They do.
Okay.
Thank you. They're downtown, Eugene downtown, 5th Street area, Eugene Bethel, Springfield downtown, Eugene U of O eWeb property, and Springfield is Glenwood.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So for more information, I would encourage you to, there's a link here, that's Business Oregon's website. Business Oregon really did run the majority of the process here in Oregon. And I would encourage you, there's a lot of really great information there. Much of it you've seen in this presentation, but there's more maps that you can look, interactive maps that you can take a look at, and more information there certainly. So we need to really talk a little bit about the legislative implications here. There is a House Bill 2144 that is in play right now up in the legislature. It's currently in the House Committee on Revenue. There's nothing scheduled for it at this point, but it is really, as it's described to me, a decoupling of the opportunity zones in Oregon. And I will say that Oregon, from what I can discern, is in the minority in this. Most states have adopted the regulations coming down from the feds, and in many cases incentivized further this opportunity. Oregon has not done that. We're taking a hard look at opportunity zones and whether or not they're a fit for this state based on this bill. And if the bill were to move forward, like I said, it would decouple from the federal regulations, and let's just say it wouldn't provide much incentive for investors to look at Oregon in this for this particular opportunity. And again, Alex is here to help in the event there are questions about that bill.
Well, Commissioner Sorensen and Commissioners, my observation is that bill actually was heard on March 11th in the House Revenue. If you recall, we were looking at another bill in Senate Revenue that had to do with problem gambling and decoupling in the same way. That bill actually did advance the problem gambling one. This one has not, and so I think what my observation is that from talking to staff in the Revenue Office, they were looking at a couple of these different things to see what the revenue impacts would be on Oregon. So my sense is that it's, as Sarah's indicated, it's just going to sit there and will die in committee at the end of the session is sort of what I'm thinking, but.
And that's certainly what I've heard, particularly since the second set of regulations dropped about a week and a half ago, and that was followed up with indication that a third set of regulations were going to come down this fall. And so my sense is, based on what I'm hearing, that we'll let this bill die in committee for lack of further refinement of regulations, and then at some point post final regulations being submitted, the state may or may not take it up again. Is that do you think that's fair? Yeah.
course, with the caveat that I've been wrong before about things that happen in San
You're
Jose.
kidding.
We'll be wrong again.
So, anything further on the topic of opportunity zones?
No,
I see Mr. Ramirez is back there as well. He's working
Yes.
with it.
Any questions after today, please direct to
Okay,
Austin.
please direct to Mr. Ramirez, okay. Questions from commissioners? Yes.
I think that what we've heard in terms of a public sector sort of perspective. I also think we need, as a Board of Commissioners, to hear a private sector perspective. I'm going to encourage, not critical, but I'm going to encourage that to occur. Here's what I'm aware of that I'd like to add to this. The opportunity zones are triggered by the sale of a capital asset for investors. What they do is they create a haven with certain abilities so that investors can frictionlessly reinvest unrealized gains into distressed communities. I think that's the intent of it. The reason I was enthused about this, and I think we should give it some attention, is because it's the first new national community investment program in over 15 years. And right now, I'm looking at some notes given me by a private accounting and legal firm that is that's trying to offer their services to investment groups that may be looking at Lane County, and I want to get Lane County in the queue. So my understanding is there's 8,700 census tracts in the country, 11% of the country by census tract that are opportunity zones. So we're in competition with them, if you would, for attracting capital to our area. So what they do is, if I may, this is just adding to, they defer tax on existing gain, right? They provide a permanent reduction on tax gain if the investments remain in the community for increasing number of years, up to permanent exclusions. So there are incentives for investment. So as I listened to this, I asked a local accounting firm, Kernet Stokes, who, from all the accounting firms in Lane County, have kind of the expert guy that's just exclusively focused on this. I would love to look at ways that Lane County might look at some of its, if it has them, I don't know, economic development resources to further incent the attraction of the kinds of businesses and investments we hope might occur in these areas. And so I'm going to request that we have a companion bit of information in addition to the public sector facilitation and explanation of the thing, how local groups are organizing to, and the overview they can get much more granularly as presented to investors. Because again, I'm looking at that opportunity for our area. So that's my request is, and the gentleman from Kernet Stokes has offered to do that if this Board of Commissioners is so inclined to continue exploring this a bit. I think it's a big deal, and I think we ought to give it some attention.
I'll just say that I can't agree more, and I think that I would love to have a follow-up where we think about our role, the county's role in getting not only the accountants who know about what individual federal income taxpayers will benefit from this, but also our own economic development component of where within these zones, within Lane County, can we highlight for those potential investors where the opportunities might be the greatest. And last but not least, this was a theme that I brought up before in talking about future work sessions, is that we have a number of credit unions in our community that have money that they're trying to leverage, they're trying to invest on behalf of their members. And if we brought the lenders into this, because oftentimes it's yes, we want a great rate of return for the individual taxpayer and make sure that they're putting their money in places that are tax advantaged, but they also need leverage money to make their projects go. And so I'd like to, maybe broaden, not that I have anything wrong with one accounting firm, but I'd like to make sure that we think about a number of experts. And I certainly think, I just looked at the Kernot Stokes website, and they do have a really nice presentation on this whole topic. So we could invite somebody from them. And I know we're getting perilously close into the topic of future work sessions, but I think that that's a great follow-up, and I really appreciate this briefing, and we're well ahead of our 20-minute deadline here.
If I might just add, there is a statewide effort going on via some community foundations to create a clearinghouse of projects. And in particular, they want to focus on projects that are outside the metro area, so outside of Portland metro area. And so we've been working, Stephen Brooks is the attorney who has been retained by the community foundations. I think Meyer Memorial Trust, Oregon Community Foundation, Ford Family are all involved in that, along with Business Oregon, to create this database of projects. And the intent behind that, as I understand it, is to make sure that this capital that can potentially come into the state and invest in these projects could potentially be directed outside of the Portland metro area, elevate the projects that could very much be just as worthy, if not more worthy, of projects outside of Portland metro, but might not get the attention because they don't have the benefit of being in the Portland metropolitan area. And so I would encourage Stephen Brooks to be part of that group, to come and present. Like I said, he's an attorney that has spent the most of the last 18 months involved in opportunity zones and would be very knowledgeable.
Okay, good.
Good to have.
We're out of time, so if everybody else will pass, I will pass too.
Okay. Does everybody else pass? All right.
If they don't, I won't.
Okay. Good. Okay. Would you like to make any other comments about opportunity zones before we go?
If I could just make a quick comment.
You certainly can.
It's really exciting to see this program because unlike other programs for the property tax system that grows the property tax base, this doesn't impact the property tax base with incentives that lower the assessed value.
Very good. So the good news is that this is not like some kind of enterprise zone or some, yeah, very good.
Since Mike didn't pass, I have a few things to say.
All right.
No, just kidding.
Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate this briefing, and thank you, Commissioner Berney, for making the suggestion in the first place. Let us now return to our main agenda. Is there anything, Mr. Rickoff, that you think we need to get done before noon
We have the consent
in particular?
calendar.
Consent calendar?
Either the consent calendar, we do have a 15-minute executive session, and I was thinking we do have Andy Clark waiting. We have the ability to get that done and get everybody to their noon meetings. I realize you all have some pretty significant obligations at noon. It's 15 minutes, it's discreet and manageable.
Hey, can he just come right here so that we don't have to move? We can do the consent calendar while he's coming down?
We can certainly give that a try.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I will pull my request for pulling 7.
Well, actually, I was going to talk about it briefly.
Oh, you were? Okay, then.
Okay, so let's go to the consent calendar and let's pull off item 6B1 and then get a motion to approve the rest of the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the consent calendar
Without item 6B1.
without item 6B1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to approve the consent calendar as printed, except for item 6B1. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say no. With regard to item 6B1, Order 19-04-30-01, the committee met and went over the various options for how to formalize the county's Board of Commissioners agenda team. And that's really what the committee did, was formalize it in the way it currently and has been operating, but it makes it clear as to how the agenda team will function. That's the purpose of this board order.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Since it was my request to pull that, that does fully complete my questions regarding that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to approve the order as presented.
So moved?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Bernie to approve Order 19-04-0, Order 19-04-30-01. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the order is adopted by unanimous vote of the Board of Commissioners. Let's see, what else can we do? Mr. Clark has arrived, and so I think at this time we will move to item 11, our executive session. And the Board of Commissioners will now meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to RS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject matter of the session as previously announced. No decision will be made in executive session. And will there be a tape recording made of this executive session?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
I don't know what happens in terms
Can
of
we have the
recording on TV.
executive session without the tape recording?
We need to keep minutes of executive sessions, one way or another.
Okay.
And I
Do we
didn't
need
run
to have a
by-
tape recording of it or not?
What's that?
Yes.
We do need to have a tape recording?
Yes, unless there's some other
I think,
way to do that.
Chair Sorensen, I believe the tape's arriving right now.
All right. So we will reserve the right to come back out of executive session into public session should the need arise. The need will arise, and we will be in recess after our executive session's completed, and we'll be reassembling right here in Harris Hall at 1:30 p.m. So at this time, we are in recess, and we'll be convening our executive session momentarily.